illness and hardships ought to accomplish in our lives. You can tell from his prayer that he's truly thankful for good days when he's healthy, feeling well. And I think he's right that most of us don't dwell on that the way we should because we don't have those daily problems that some have. So you can see to that end, they're better off than we are. See, from that standpoint, because if a person can stop and be aware of the will of God, then that's mission accomplished. That's what hardships should bring us to. That's their design. James spoke of that when he said, knowing that the testing of our faith works steadfastness, but let patience have its perfect work. See, let it work on us, do what it ought to, where we'll see our sufficiency is in the Lord, where we'll see clearly our need for Him, where we'll pray, as James chapter 4, our section now, and you might be turning there to verse 13, says it should teach us to always be aware of God's will, that it should reign supreme always, even as we are making plans, even as we are thinking through and investing time and effort into what are we going to do in the future. We need to always be aware of the Lord's will. At verse 13 beginning, James says, come now, you who say today or tomorrow, we shall go to such and such a city and spend a year there, buy and sell and make a profit, whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time, then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live, or do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. We have before us an admonition to be careful when we speak. That when we speak, we ought to always incorporate God's will. There's an admonition in here to be cognizant, aware always that life is brief. That as we make plans, see, let's rest assured they may not come to fruition if it's not the Lord's will. A lot of people woke up this morning thinking they were going to eat breakfast, and they didn't make it. And a lot of people got up this morning thinking that they were going to be able to go to church. They're not going to make it. Yesterday, a lot of people thought about this good day, this first day, what it means, made plans, but they're no longer here with us. You probably have done it before, pulled the little clock that runs and it ticks off. Every 2 seconds, I believe, 1.8 seconds, somebody dies. So a good many people have already gone as we've started our dialogue this morning. And so it's a real sobering thought. And when James says, come now, you stand here, you who say, who make plans, see, when you really don't know what tomorrow will bring. So, let's you and I, as you look at this text, you can see clearly what's required of us. That he's not suggesting we can't make plans. See, he's saying, you come, you who make plans, but you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. See, this is what they say. And those words are empty, see. And incidentally, that word down there where he says you boast in your arrogance, that's what Mr. Thayer says that word there means. It's empty talk. See, it's somebody that's just running their mouth. And that's what all of us are doing when we leave the Lord out of our plans. See, because what we hope, boy, God forbid that we get cut down, see, like so many already this morning, see, unexpectedly, no doubt many of them. Now, some are on their deathbed, but that's not always the case. You and I know that we've seen people pull out of the church parking lot. Man, I can't remember his name now. Can't remember. I think it's Brother Phillips, H.E. Phillips. Was it Brother Phillips that got through preaching and backed out of the parking lot, ran over a kid and killed him? He had held a gospel meeting at our building at Legion Street. I'm going to say a week before that, just before he ran over and backed into and killed a child, if I remember correctly. See, the point is, see, here's a little child struck down by a faithful gospel preacher. See, unbeknownst to anybody, see, it shows that we need to be cognizant of God and that his will be done always. And so the questions sometimes come up, do we really have to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or do that? Do we really have to say the words? What about just thinking it? Any thoughts or comments on that? Anybody want to address that? Yes, Doug.
Such.
Yeah, I agree. That's right. It's a good many of them. We're going to read a few of them. But, the Lord, when we pray, we ought to say it, shouldn't we? This is how we ought to. He said, pray, pattern your prayers after this right here. Our Father, say, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy will be done. See, we're certainly taught when we talk to God, we ought to say it. Think it and everything else, brother. Yeah.
Better think it, or we won't say it.
Yeah. Now that's that came up, Rex, at the Bible study over at the assisted living home. That came up. Somebody says, "Well, what about just thinking it?" And I said, "Well, you have to think it before you say it. So you surely ought to be thinking it. You got to think it. You can't say it without thinking it. You see." And so that understanding needs to dwell with us, doesn't it? See, that as we make plans, even before we make them, see, as we approach it, we know that I may not make it through today, but Lord, here's what I'm planning on doing today. See, that needs to be a part of us, a part of our thinking. See, you notice he says, "Come now, you who say," see, and today, tomorrow, we'll go to such and such a city, buy, sell, make a profit. And then James says, whereas you don't know what will be on tomorrow. See, that's the statement. They're saying things, and James saying, what you're saying, you really don't know that, do you? See, whereas you don't know what's going to be on tomorrow. And isn't that the truth? See, now you got a doctor's appointment tomorrow at 2:00. Well, if the Lord wills, we do, for sure. See, And you notice James gets it really close when he says, come now, you who say today. See, it's not, when we talk about future plans, future as in right now, at the next step you take is how future the Lord wills need to be. See, because he says, come now, you who say today, we're going to go. Well, you may not make it today. We may not. See, and we need to incorporate that mindset into our thinking. That's what's being prohibited here, is bragging about what you're going to do. That's the idea. It's a sin of the tongue. And you notice he contrasts that, doesn't he? When he says what you ought to say, you see. You notice that? See, and instead, see, now here, come now, you who say, and then here's what they say. And then he says, but you ought to say this. Wayne, I see a finger. Oh, boy, things are, yeah.
Back to what Steve said earlier, well, Lauren, she sent this note over saying it proclaims our relying on God to the world.
Yeah.
It shows that God is first in our life.
Appreciate that, because it really does, doesn't it? I mean, if somebody heard you talk, and your thought is, I'm thinking it. Well, they certainly wouldn't know that, would they? Sounds like you're pretty sure you're going to go into such and such a city and buy and make you a profit. Is what it sounds like. They certainly wouldn't know you's a Christian, would they? That you were cognizant of the Lord's will in your life. They certainly wouldn't know that. See? So that notion of merely thinking it won't cut it, because it sets an awfully bad example. You notice if you were to see that, you were to step back and you see somebody talking about tomorrow. Oh, like the Luke 12 guy, right? Ain't that him, just spitting image of him? It is just, now right here, boy, I'm doing well. Wait, let me build. I got a lot here. I'm going to need some more room. And so what I'm going to do here is what I'm going to do here. And you notice in that parable, there may be another one like it, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. It says, but God said to him. You notice all the parables, they'll talk about a man and stay within a picture of men operating. This one here, this guy's making plans, and it says, and Jesus spoke a parable to them. See, after saying that a man's life doesn't consist in the abundance of things which he possessed, and Jesus gave a parable, and then when the man got through bragging, it says, but God said to him. See, in the parable, but God said to him, thou fool, this day thy soul is required of thee. See, there's that daily cognizant awareness we must have as a Christian. In the moment, if it be thy will. See, because just the minute we get ahead of ourselves, what if we get cut down? See, what if somebody swerves over? See, what if we swerve over? See, that's how that works, isn't it? That's how brief life is. See, whereas you don't know what's going to be on tomorrow. And then he raises, one of the great questions. James raises a lot of them. Where do wars and fights come from? Here he says, okay, now, what is your life? See, now that's what Dove just prayed. See, boy, you better be thankful. When you have a good day, get on your knees and offer thanks for it. Be grateful. Enjoy it. See, don't get too far down the road. And the lessons when you don't feel good, use that moment. See, what is your life? It's as a vapor. And see, it's as a vapor, whether you healthy, whether you well, whether you rich, whether you poor, it is as a vapor. That's what everybody has to understand. See, and he's going to get on the rich here next because they don't understand that. See. Any thoughts, questions? Yes, Jeremy.
Not only, verse 16 shows that it's wrong, that it's evil. If you're going to say, I'm going to do this or do that, it's wrong not to say if the Lord will. So, to your point, not only are you just taking it for granted that you're going to do what you said you're going to do, you also do wrong if you say it and you don't say if the Lord wills, I'm going to do this or do that. He says all such
boasting.
Rejoicing is evil. You're rejoicing in your boasting.
That's I looked at that a few translations, and I liked that idea because that is the idea. It's this inner forgetting about God. You're rejoicing as you talk. Boy, I'm wealthy. Look, I need some more barns. Now, what I got right here, see, I'm something, and not aware. See, you could get cut down, Brother Rex.
I hear many people say, I plan to. Not I'm going to.
Uh-huh.
I plan to.
Uh-huh.
I think there's something in that.
I agree with you.
It is Christian anyway.
Yeah, I agree with
I
you.
don't know that is enough.
If it gets all the way to where we need to be.
Get some of it.
Yeah. Y'all hear that?
You're not boasting.
Rex said, a lot of people, I've done it, you probably have too. We'll say, well, now I plan to. And what you're trying to suggest is, I understand, I may not. See, now here's what I'm now planning to do now. See that right there? That goes a long way, don't it? Now the question, Rex said, does it get all the way over here on this one? Excuse me? Okay, don't get all the way. Yeah. If the Lord wills. Yeah.
The Lord willing is telling you where that's coming from. That's not on your own accord.
I'm with
I
you.
plan to do something. I may plan it on my own accord. I'm planning on doing this. But Lord willing, that solidifies where that's coming from.
I agree.
It's not on my own accord.
I agree with you. And here's why. Go ahead, finish
I wanna
up,
add
Glenn.
something else, and this isn't
Please
involved
do.
in that, but this goes even further when explaining something to the world. When Jonah was caught up in his situation, in chapter 1 and verse 9, when he was speaking to these other men, when they asked him who he was, and he said, I'm Hebrew, I fear the Lord God of heaven who made the sea and dry ground. At first thought, what's that got to do with anything? I found over 25 places in the scriptures of different men getting ready to say something or explain something with real close to that. I'm not going to read them all, but here's another one in Acts when Paul was speaking to the unknown God, and he started out, God, who made the world and everything in it, since he is the Lord of heaven and earth. Over 20 or 25 places I found, it's acknowledging back to. This is why. It's not just start a conversation. It's telling where it's coming from. And the intent behind it. It's not you. It's not me.
I appreciate that very much. I think I know exactly what you're saying. And I think it's a beautiful thought and sentiment that Glenn is saying, that there's a lot of passages that out of nowhere, when somebody asks them, what's your name? And you said, now look, I fear the Lord of heaven. So before you get into all the whatevers, you're acknowledging God. And that's a good thought, and that's a good exercise there to go down and dig up 25 times where that happens, and that's true. But you know why I agree with you, Glenn, is the passage says what you ought to say is if the Lord's will, we shall live and do this or that. Now, that's why I think we ought to say it. James says, now come now, you who say, and then he says, but instead what you ought to say is if the Lord will, and then say whatever you're going to say. That's the truth about it. And Jeremy, and
we usually isolate verse 17 so we isolate it from the text to give a broad definition of what is sin. Well, 17 goes right along.
it does. We does, and I want to talk about 17 because in this context, it explains what Jeremy just said. See, it's wrong. It's a matter of right and wrong. See, verse 17. See, when this isn't done, especially when we know we ought to do it, it's wrong. So you've neglected to acknowledge the God of heaven and his will. So you've not elevated God to the level he ought to be. See, to him, therefore, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it's sin. It's a transgression. It's that serious of a concept. See, and that speaks to what Glenn just pointed out also, is that we need to acknowledge God always, see, and let people know first and foremost, we serve the Lord. And now let's talk now. How are you? I'm Rodney. See, that's what we're talking about here. He found these instances, see, where men, like you think, well, what in the world has that got to do with it? The God of heaven and who you serve. Now, I'm asking you, where are you from? You know, and so but that's who we are. And that this verse is really guiding us to, you know, what is your life now? As you make plans, what is your life? Isn't it as a vapor? And you notice God said this. You know, this isn't some man sitting down in the lab figuring out, you know, ooh, life is a vapor. See, this is the God of heaven telling us. You're not sure what your life is? I tell you one thing it is, it's just like that. And I know that because the God of heaven said it was. He breathed life into man. He knows it. And what is your life? God said it's just like that. Well, everybody in the world, all the inhabitants of the earth, they need to wake up to that fact. Say, can't you look around? It's just like that. That's what God said. What is your life? Say, and he would say that to the boaster, to the braggart. Say, it's a vapor. So you're wrong. Oh, we're going to go into such and such a city. Oh, we're going to go, we're going, like, let's see here. Let's see, a couple of months from now, let me make out you can make out a calendar, but let's let Lord will, you know, if the Lord wills. See, because he backs his plans all the way down to today. Come now, you who say today, we're going to go do this, see. Let's get it right here in our assembly, right here. We're planning, Lord willing, to break bread here shortly. That's what we're talking about. That's what James is talking about. See, that's what he's talking about without Jeremy.
Studies like this is good. You know, I haven't always done it. You know, sometimes you neglect to do it, to say it, but isn't it just like anything else that he tells us we have to do? Like why? Because I've heard people buck against this point that you don't have to. But why are you so adamant that you don't have to do it? But you can go to another Bible passage about something totally different. He says you got to do this, and you wouldn't say, "Oh, I don't have to do that." Uh-huh. You understand? You know, I have to obey that command. Why not this one? What's so? Because it takes a lot of. You got to really get that in your mind. You know, it takes a lot of effort to remember to do that, to say that, to acknowledge him and all that you plan on doing verbally. You know, it's difficult for people. They think we're being legalists and things of that nature. Well, it's a clear passage to understand. Just Work on it.
It's
Let's
trying
work
it,
on
isn't it?
I need to work on it.
And I've run across a few people that didn't have the courage to say it. You know, a lot of people in the world, they'll kind of scold you, won't they? Well, what do you mean if the Lord's will? You know, it's always the Lord's will. God always wants us to be healthy. You know, they get after you because you know, are you coming or not? Well, Lord willing. You know, and they go, I mean, are you planning on coming or not? Let's get down to the, see, they get after you because you're cognizant that life is a vapor. I'm planning on, doing it, but I may not get to. And we'll see you then, Lord willing. You see, and it drives them, you know, it gets after them because, see, the Christian has slowed down enough, see, even in his speech. Come now, you who say, see, even in his speech, to give God the glory, to honor, recognize God at the outset. What you ought to say is, if the Lord wills, we'll do this or that. See, come now, you who say this or that. Well, put on the front of it, if the Lord wills, we're going to go into such and such. Yeah, see, there it is. There's the proper order. Donnie?
Several weeks ago, I was leaving work and not in a religious discussion, but walking out with a coworker. And he said this, and that was so refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
Although he's religious, he's not a member of the church, but he was, you know, that impressed me,
Mm-hmm.
that someone would say that,
Mm-hmm.
and have the courage to say
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, do I say it often?
Mm-hmm. But it does. You can see the courage element out here in the world, can't you? Because it's interjecting God in the middle of just everyday conversations. And that takes something, see, in this age of leaving God out of everything. See, here's a person that every sentence out of his mouth is, if the Lord wills, if the Lord will, Lord willing, I will, Lord willing, say. You know, Jesus, and we've all thought about his prayer and his great desire that he didn't have to go through that night, see. And yet, see, we can see he's saying, let this cup pass from me, Lord willing. See, if it be your will, according to your will, see, as we ask things of God, and he comes back again, Lord willing, could you let this cup pass from me? See, if it be thy will. And so here's our Savior, the Creator, in human form, appealing to the will of God, elevating the will of his Father. So who are the created not to acknowledge God's will? See, if the God of heaven, the Son himself, see, would lower himself and appeal to the will of God in his desires and wishes, see, that says a lot, doesn't it? So we got James saying, if the Lord wills. Paul said, if the Lord's will. Let me read a few, but Acts 18:21, but took leave of them, saying, this is Paul, I must by all means keep this coming feast in Jerusalem, but I will return again to you, God willing. And he sailed from Ephesus. 1 Corinthians 4:19, but I will come to you shortly, if the Lord wills, and I will know not the word of those who are puffed up, but the power. See, isn't that striking? You know, that the guy's telling us these inspired men telling us what to do, they did it. You know? See, Paul says, now I'm coming to you shortly if the Lord wills. See, and then he keeps on, that's right. See, Paul understood. Say, if the Lord wills, I'm coming. I'm coming if the Lord wills. Any thoughts, comments, or anything along those lines? This boasting with our tongue, it's evil. It is sin. It's called boasting in your arrogance, rejoicing in your arrogance. And it's wrong. It's evil. Now, it can't get no clearer than that. That's all evil. That ought to settle it for all of us. Yes, sir.
I was going to say on a similar note, even when you're by yourself in the morning, waking up and saying, thanks God for another day.
Yeah.
Even when you're by yourself, it's good to say thank you and just acknowledge that He's given you the ability to draw on the breath of the Lord.
That's a wonderful thought, isn't it? That's right. That's it's almost more important, because one of the things in studying James, one, I found an area too where I need to purify my heart, and turn back to God in an area or two. And like I've tried to emphasize, the people in James have forgotten who it is they serve. See, to be talking to God, but you don't believe what you say. See, you're going to pray to him, but you don't have faith that he'll accomplish that. To be asking God for things just to consume it up on your own lust. See, like to pray for health. I tried to point this out. Just merely for health's sake. You're not planning on visiting or call. You don't want to feel good so you can work in the kingdom. You just want to feel good. Well, that looks to me like that's just purely to consume it up on your own lust. See, what about adding these spiritual elements to our health, to our pleas to God? See, and so this what I'm getting at here. See, when we're at home in our closets, that's rubber meet the road. And that's where you say, Lord, if it be thy will, I'm so thankful for this morning and thankful for thy good will in blessing me today. And may you be with me throughout the day, Lord. See, that's because that's what we all got to get to. We forget that. See, but like where do wars and fights come from? Those people have forgotten who they serve. God is not blessing any of that. You may convince yourself that's the case, but he is not. See, but again, these are all Christian people, see. Where do wars and fights come from among you? See, Christians behaving badly have forgotten who they serve. And they need to go in their closet when they talk to God, acknowledge him. See, draw near to him, that he may draw near to them. That's what you can think this is about others, and that's kind of how you play your cards, and you forget that the God of heaven is looking down upon us. We forget that the God of heaven is listening to our words, our boastings, our speaking evil of our brother, our judging of our brother. See, we forget that the God of heaven is watching and listening. Come now, God says, you who say. All such boasting is evil. He's judged it already. It's already been judged. So this isn't at the judgment day. At the judgment day, you're going to get rewarded for not saying it. But it's already been judged. Those who leave God out of their plans, it is evil. See, all such boasting is evil. Any thoughts or comments along those lines?
Rodney, not to belabor the point, but just in the way that the English language works. When you put the phrase, if the Lord wills, in front of something, say, if the Lord wills, I'm going to eat lunch after service. That phrase is what we call a dependent clause, meaning what follows afterwards, everything stated here is dependent on what's said prior. And we get in our head that no, really, what we're doing is dependent on if the Lord wills. Like I said, our language itself recognizes dependency. We need to recognize it.
It's a good point. That even the grammar, isn't it, draws and bears out what's under consideration. So Jesus at Proverbs 3, I wanted to bring this point up. And verse 27, it says, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it is in the power of your hand to do so. And I've got this verse sitting at verse 17. Verse 17, as it closes out this particular thought, you know, it says, therefore to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. A lot of times, you know, that's the verse where procrastination is brought up. And that's a good place to bring it up because that's a form of neglect, isn't it? Now, here's something you ought to do, and you know you ought to do it, but you don't do it. Well, that's wrong, you say. And this verse here, see, it implies that you got time and opportunity and resources. See, so this verse here isn't talking about you know you ought to do something, but you ain't got the money to do it. So that ain't wrong, is it, Rodney? Well, it ain't. This verse ain't talking about that. This verse here is talking about when you got everything you within your means to do this good thing, know to do good, but you don't do it. That's what this verse is talking about. That's wrong. That's always wrong. And the little proverb I read, the reason I read it, one of the invitations that I used to keep, I may have got it out of there because it's too, you got to be, you know, it might be too hard on me, you know. But that proverb I read says, you know, don't withhold good from those whom it is due when it is in your power, when it is in the power of your hand to do so. What comes to mind, I don't know where I got this little idea from, but, you know, when you know, a lot of times when you're around begging people, they always beg and asking for stuff. And a lot of times, see, you can anticipate going into them situations. And you know, and you could say, well, I'm going to leave this money out. And that way, when they ask me for some money, I can honestly say, I won't have any. I don't have none. You see, I see a few smiles. Maybe you, you know, I'm not suggesting those of you who are smiling have thought that, but you know, where you just figure, boy, I'm empty. I ain't got any. Saying you feel good, you know, so I'm out. You see, okay. Well, what we want to make sure of is when we can help people, you know, Because you could say, if you'll give me a few minutes, I'll run and get some, But the point is, you're trying to circumvent doing good or helping. See, if you empty out your wallet, you can't give nobody. You ain't got nothing. I'm out of cash. You see, in that way, right? You see, in that way, you feel good about that. And to him that knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. The point I'm making, it's a lot of circumventing. See, like we're talking about circumventing if you just think it. Can you just think if the Lord's will? Well, you can, you must in order to say it. But like Rex said, boy, does it get all the way over there to say, now I understand, now I'm planning on going. That's right. Now God, I ain't heard no God in there, but I see the little, you see. So thank y'all for all the participation and thoughts this morning.